Hey Jude, how are you? So the Brazilian economy is doing quite well, right? And as you mentioned here, the exchange rate is being favorable to Brazil, and I think there are some questions in terms of the U.S. Economy. Sometimes we you hear that everything is well, that the Fed is not going to increase the interest rates anymore. And then on the next day, you hear that consumers are not super confident and they are not spending as much as expected. So particularly if you are comparing, the Brazilian economy to the U.S. economy, I mean, just for comparing, I think that this highlights that Brazil is in a pretty good position. We can say that there was a lot of work done by the prior administration in terms of infrastructure, in terms of modernizing Brazil, in terms of taxation, in terms of the procedures of sending money into Brazil, which have been historically complex and absolutely uh, more complex than you would find in any other country in the world, right? So there was a lot of things that were started in the prior administration, and the current administration is actually keeping some of these good things afloat as we speak. So, for instance, the taxation environment in Brazil, which has been like absolutely out of this world in terms of complexity, in terms of like the overall load that this was bringing to businesses in general. There is a bill in the Congress like to overhaul the entire taxation approach when it comes to the economy. So all of those things, I think they are contributing, to the strengthening of the Brazilian real. And I would say we don't expect the U.S. dollar to become much stronger than it is right now, or in another way of saying, like this type of currency exchange rate that you see today. The idea, particularly from the financial advisors, is that the rate is going to remain kind of the same. Okay, and I understand it's important. Many of our clients, they buy real estate in Brazil, and they kind of naturally get concerned about the rate, because then if you sign a contract today to perform in 90 days down the road, and if there is a huge or a substantial exchange rate change, that could impact how many US dollars or how many euros or whatever currency you have, you're going to end up using to buy the property, right? So, all in all, we feel pretty positive about the Brazilian economy. Hello, Chan. Welcome to our live. Any questions for us? So, Chan is asking, can you tell us some information about asylum for religious reason? Chan, Brazil, when it comes to asylum, it's a major destination. Brazil has historically, favored immigration for humanitarian reasons. And only recently, Brazil has started to offer immigration routes, uh, like to those immigrants who want to kind of buy in their way, right? So only in the last administration, starting roughly in 2018, Brazil started to offer some visas for people buying real estate, for people investing in business. But focusing on your question, so Brazil is a tradition destination for asylum seekers. In terms of paperwork, they are going to usually ask for a passport. They are going to usually ask for your birth certificate because birth certificates are a part of the identification process in Brazil. So many, immigrant applicants, they are surprised by all the red tape surrounding birth certificates. But the reason for this is a passport itself. It's a document that's usually accepted internationally, right? That's the whole purpose of a passport. But for the birth certificate, there are steps required. So, if your country of origin is part of the Hague Convention, your birth certificate will need to get an apostille, which basically it's a stamping or a piece of paper that your government is going to attach to your birth certificate to make it acceptable internationally. Okay. In addition to the apostille, and I'm going to write over here in the chat the name apostille just in case you want to do some research later on. In addition to the apostille, you're going to need the sworn translation. The sworn translation is done in Brazil after you get the apostille on your birth certificate. And all of those steps, they are required for you to apply for an asylum residency in Brazil. Of course, you also need to provide the specifics of the reason why you're asking for the asylum, like if there is religious persecution in your country, like you should provide some evidence. This could be, for instance, like if there are a newspaper that is publishing the persecution, and if the persecution is not being, of course, informed in your own country, you could use, a publication from another country, right? So because usually if the persecution it's being supported by the government could also be, pushing the newspapers to not publish information about the persecution. So in this case, you could use like, newspapers, news from other countries that happen to be reporting the religious persecution. Okay, um, particularly if you come from a country in which the alphabet is not the Latin alphabet, right? You have, for instance, China or Japan or Israel, Arabic countries that use a different type of, writing system. In this case, you also may need from the Brazilian consulate or embassy in your country, you may need a certificate explaining how your name would be written in Brazil, okay? Because there is a big concern that, like when transcribing your name, the information is going to be somewhat lost in the process. So, to avoid this type of decision to be made in Brazil by the immigration personnel who have no clue about how the writing system works in your country of origin, the Brazilian immigration is going to want the Brazilian consulate or embassy in your country to provide a certificate explaining how your name and additional information are going to be spelled in Portuguese, right? So this is usually overlooked by applicants. They believe they can just have some documents and make this work out. But usually that's going to be one of the first requests, for applicants coming from countries where the writing system is not like the Western writing system. I hope that makes sense. Now, this said, in very serious cases, right? Let's say Afghanistan, right? The Afghanistan, like everybody knows about, like the war, about, the moment when the U.S. Military forces, they left the country went like into a kind of implosion, right? And it may be extremely difficult for you to obtain, for instance, the certificate because maybe there is no Brazilian embassy or Brazilian consulate in Afghanistan. In this case, the Brazilian authorities, they may choose to accept whatever documents you have to show your identity, right? So, giving you a very practical example, maybe a person coming from Afghanistan, they are going to have like an old passport that is no longer valid, but that's the only document they have, and they are unable to get a newer passport. Or maybe they have just the birth certificate, but somehow they got to Brazil without a passport, right? Like very difficult to imagine this scenario, but let's assume that this person took a vessel, boarded some type of cargo ship, and end up in Brazil. And the Brazilian immigration authority could then decide if they are going to accept the types of documents you are providing. So, if you are able to provide all the documents required, right, like the supporting documents for the religious persecution, your passport, the birth certificate with the apostle, the sworn translation, the letter from from the Brazilian consulate and the Brazilian embassy, all of those requirements, of course, you're going to make your life much easier because you're giving everything that the Brazilian immigration is asking for you to successfully file an asylum immigration case in Brazil. However, if you don't have such documentation, then you're going to depend on the goodwill of the Brazilian immigration to review your paperwork and understand that you're not providing more paperwork because you are unable to do so, right? So I hope this is, just some introduction on the team. We do not specialize in asylum cases here at the firm, but we do handle, other types of visas. So I can tell you this information, and if you need more information, you can send us an email. We can set up a consultation for you. There is a cost for the consultation, but if you schedule a consultation and if you decide later on to hire our firm, whatever you're paying for the consultation is applied as a credit, right? And the reason why we do that is just because we receive a large number of emails from people all over the world, like asking for information. So usually, what the way we try to, participate in the international community is like we have a lot of content in our website, and that's what we are doing, like to share information. We are also providing the live streams where we can discuss themes of interest. Like, of course, it's a free service, but when it comes to this moment when we're gonna discuss your particulars, we need to charge something. Or otherwise, we're gonna spend 24 hours a day just giving free advisory for everyone, and we are unable to do that as a professional organization. I hope that makes sense. So this is it for now, Chen. If you wanna proceed with the consultation, send us an email. I'm gonna write our email address over here. You are welcome to send us an email, and we would be pleased to assist in your asylum claim in Brazil. Chained. So we do handle. I just said we don't specialize. That's not our number one specialty. But you could search, and a problem that you're gonna find, like when trying to get immigration services in Brazil, it is something kind of surprising for foreign citizens, is that many immigration firms, like, they don't have a level of spoken or written English enough for a decent communication. Okay, so if you want to get to those firms, sometimes they don't even have a website, like to showcase whatever services they have, like in other languages. So if you're trying to find this content in English, they're not going to show up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write in Portuguese here so you can use Google to search for these firms. So I just entered like two different keywords, and they are in Portuguese. So again, you could use those keywords to do a search for maybe a firm that's going to specialize in those cases, and then you can compare the options you have, and hopefully be able to have a meaningful communication with them. Javier Hernandez, thank you so much for all the videos you post for us. I learned a lot from them and just recently purchased a property in Brazil. Thank you for sharing, Javier. I'm very happy with that. That's the idea, to contribute to the expat and foreign citizens with interests in Brazil. I'm happy you bought your purchase. I hope you have a blast with your property. Javier Hernandez, I will contact you and I purchased my second property after learning the difficulties of applying for residency. Any advice on expats trying to achieve dual citizenship? Javier, so the first thing is that Brazil is a great choice as a second citizenship. And as you know already, it's a journey, right? Like it's not like you're going to just apply and you're going to get the citizenship a couple of months down the road. It's actually a journey. Just to apply for the residency, you need to have a good professional who's going to, apply the right way. So it's not going to take you years to achieve the residency. But in theory, real estate is one of the main tracks for residency in Brazil that we handle here at the firm. It's very convenient, right? Like you don't need to rely on someone else. You're not piggybacking on someone else to acquire the residency. So it does help you preserve your relationship. Like sometimes we have clients who buy a property and they happen to have a relationship with a Brazilian national. And when they ask us, like, should I apply based on marriage or should I apply based on common law marriage, which, is something big in Brazil, I will usually say, listen, it's your choice. But if you have the option to apply based on real estate, that's an interesting possibility because it's not like you are using this other person as a means to get your residency, right? Like, so it doesn't create this kind of attachment. And, like we hope that your relationship is going to last forever. But if that's not the case, like you are not entangled, right? Like this relationship with your, residency. In terms of the path for acquiring the residency and then the citizenship, if done through real estate, usually you apply for the residency and you're going to get an initial 4 years. Okay, these 4 years is known as a temporary residency. So you're going to have 4 years and you just need to stay in Brazil 14 days every couple of years. So the requirement to keep the residency, to keep your right of residency is pretty low. Other countries such as the US, they are going to ask for 6 months, right? Like Brazil just asks like 14 days for every couple of years. And after 4 years, you apply for the permanent residency, okay? Now, some people, they choose to apply for the citizenship as well. And the citizenship you could apply after 4 years residing in Brazil. And if you are applying for the citizenship, then you need to stay longer than just 14 days every couple of years, of course. So the 14 days every couple of years is the requirement to keep you as a legal resident in Brazil. But if you want to apply for the citizenship, then of course you need a higher commitment in terms of time spent in Brazil. And usually it depends on the circumstances, it depends on your specifics. But usually you should be in Brazil for at least 3 years out of the 4 years that you have the residency in Brazil to qualify to apply for the citizenship. Another major requirement is that you speak a somewhat functional Portuguese, right? Like you don't need to be like super fluent in Portuguese, but you do need to speak a reasonable level of Portuguese. For instance, that's going to be enough for you to communicate with the immigration personnel at the time of your application for the residency. So again, great choice of second citizenship. We see what's going on in the world right now, and Brazil could be a great plan B for anyone who lives majority in the US or in Europe, right? Like if there is a world war which doesn't sound so far-fetched, unfortunately, nowadays, Brazil would be a great plan B. Okay, Javier, I hope this helps. Feel free to schedule a consultation with us. We can review your specifics and come up with a plan that's going to take into consideration your goals and your specifics. We have here a question from Moses Mibagyu. I hope the pronunciation is not too off, Moses. Apologize. Thank you, sir, for this opportunity. I want to know, after buying the property and getting the residency, who manages the property? Is it a lawyer or a realtor who collects rent for the foreign owners? So that's a good question, Moses. Many of our clients, they do exactly what you just said. They're going to buy the property. Just by buying the property, it got to be done the right way, right? Like there are several specifics on how you're going to buy the property. It's not just going to buy any property. The property needs to qualify. There are, several requirements. It got to be urban property. It got to be, either already built or in the processes of being constructed by a major developer. It gotta be for the minimum amount. You need to have a legal deed, right? So if you buy a property that doesn't have a legal deed, it does not qualify, and so on. So you gotta do the right way. But if you do the right way, you get the residency, and there is no requirement that you live in the property. So you can buy the property, apply for the residency, and rent out your property, right? Many of our clients, they like to do that because they want to experience different locations in Brazil. So by renting out the property that they bought for the purpose of the residency, they have enough funds, to travel around Brazil. And if they find a suitable location, they could also rent this other location using the funds that they are getting from their own property. Okay, so pretty common circumstances. Great idea, Moses. And, there are both arrangements, right? So when it's a major like investor, when it's like a buyer of multiple properties, we usually handle the management at the firm. But for one-time purchases, right? Like if you're just buying a single property for the purpose of getting the residency, usually you're going to be better off using a short rental management service. For instance, we have in Sao Paulo some clients who are going to use this short-term rental, management service, and they are going to manage all the rental. So you don't need to handle, right? Like you don't need to worry about answering messages coming, from Airbnb and whatever websites they are promoting. You just receive the payments. Okay. Now, one challenge is that getting a bank account in Brazil is not easy, right? And one of the requirements for the bank account is that you have the RNM card, which is a card that's available for residents. So before you can have a bank account, first you need to buy the property, and then you're going to apply for the residency. And once you get the residency, usually it takes like a couple of months for you to get this card. Once you get the card, then you can open the bank account so you can receive the payments, right? Most management services, they are not going to send money abroad. Okay. Sending money into Brazil or getting money from Brazil, it's usually more complex than in most countries of the world. So parties in Brazil, they will rarely offer, oh, I can send the money to you, I don't know, in the US or Europe or Asia. That's going to be very rare. So the path of getting a bank account is usually a must, right? Because you don't want a third party, holding on your money for too long. Okay, if they're gonna hold for a couple of months while you're still getting the bank account, that's fine, but you don't want someone, like accumulating, the monthly income from your property for a year, for instance, right? The Brazilian culture is very dynamic. Sometimes people have emergencies, and if they have your money in their hands, like they could use, and when you ask for the money, they say, "Well, something happened," and I know it sounds weird, but we saw that happening more than once. So that's why we are sharing here with you this possibility. Make sure once you get the residency, you open a bank account and you ask for the monies to be deposited into your Brazilian bank account every month. Okay, Moses, I hope this works as an introduction to the team. If you want to know more, if you want to, have your specifics discussed, feel free to schedule a consultation. All right, so thank you so much for your participation, Shan, Javier, Moses, and Jude. We're gonna be live again on Sunday. So if you have a follow-up questions, you can participate in our live stream on Sunday. On Sunday, we're gonna be here at 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. Okay, 3:30 p.m. like afternoon time. If you go by military time or Brazilian time, we're talking about 15:30. Okay, Brazilian time, Rio de Janeiro time. And, I'm going to be glad to take more questions if you have by then. You guys have a great day.